All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Living the Dream podcast. Today on the show, we have Christopher Jay Henningsen, who is an engineer, artist, and the author of Mindful Programming. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course, thanks for coming on the show. And we like to jump right in. So if you could start with telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you like to do for fun, that'd be great.
Okay. Grew up in rural Nova Scotia in Eastern Canada. I always had a lot of interests growing up. I was very into spirituality as a kid. Also had kind of a talent for math and sciences and wanted to be an inventor. So bounced around in some blue collar jobs for a while after high school. Ended up going to school for engineering. Uh, and I've always tried to combine my interest in the kind of the hard sciences with those more subjective and hard to understand parts of life. And one of the projects that's most recently led to is this book that I was writing. And in general, that's the kind of thing I like to do. I like to be creative. I like to make things, particularly things that are a little bit on the cusp of different disciplines, combining different flavors, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love it. Well, tell us a little bit about the book. What is the premise of the book and kind of what content do you go through in it?
Yeah, so the reason I was interested in this podcast is because it's a book about basically taking the skills that one learns during computer programming and applying that to inner exploration and inner development. And in computer programming, the thing that's most important is the language. If you understand the language that the computer speaks, then you can speak to it and you can get it to do what you want, and that can lead to some pretty interesting things. And one of the ideas that I explore pretty deeply in the book is about the importance of dreams and the idea that when we dream, that's like a language that the different parts of our mind use to talk to each other. Because different parts of our mind, there's parts that think in pictures, there's parts that think in stories and words and math. They have to somehow exchange that information, and dreams seem to be the way that that happens. So to me, paying attention to your dreams and paying attention to the kind of language that your dreams speak in is a really powerful practice that everyone can do.
For sure. So, I feel like a lot of people have dreams and then they forget those
Mm.
dreams. So, are you a
Hmm.
fan of like lucid dreaming? That was something I dabbled in as a kid. Like,
Hmm.
have you trained yourself to be able to remember your dreams and realize when you're dreaming? Because so many people just forget right when they wake up.
I was also a fan of that as a kid and have not kept it up. It was always pretty hard.
Hmm.
Um, and I think also, yeah, it is something that I did a lot as a kid. And I got kind of good at it, but it is something you have to keep up. But I think for me, there's also there's value in just seeing where your dreams go when you're not, controlling them. Because once you wake up and you realize you're in a dream and you can do stuff like that's cool, but at that point, it becomes kind of about the sorts of things your waking mind wants to do.
Hmm.
Um, and what I find pretty interesting these days in my life is looking back on the dreams that I've had. I do try to remember them. Like when I wake up, the first thing I kind of do is think back on the dreams I had, try to maybe put words to them, just to give my waking memory something to hold on to. But I try to just look at the dreams without the interference of my waking mind, because there's a part of my mind that thought it was important that or what thought it was important to express that thing as it happened. So that's more the direction I'm going in exploring dreams these days in my life.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah, I got to the point. I think I controlled one or two dreams maybe, but now I'm still good
Mhm.
at realizing when I'm dreaming, what my dream is, and like experiencing it as a dream, which is always a fun
Mhm.
experience because then you can wake up and kind of remember it, and it's cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of, I think, development that happens in dreams. There's a lot of places we go where there's some kind of lesson, some kind of message that we're supposed to bring back.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. Tell us a little bit about your motivation. What gets you up and keeps you going every day?
Hmm. There's a number of there's a number of aspects depending on the part of my life that we're talking about. So I think going to my day job, for example, that's more about wanting to be dependable, wanting to learn some new skills that I'm developing. Uh, and then there's also I'm one of those people that genuinely does want to make the world a better place. That's which I realize that that's a bit arrogant, but it is really a key motivation of mine to say, you know what, we could add some beauty here. We could add some inquisitiveness here. I do believe that it's worthwhile to put our mark on things and to take part in the flow of energy that happens, and to really make that the best contribution we can. So the art that I do, and the writing, the podcasts, all these creative outlets that I have, those are all in some way motivated by the idea of adding beauty to the world, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Talk to me about why you feel that that's arrogant.
Hmm. Well, I think it's just become such a cliche
Hmm.
in our society. The idea of making the world a better place. I think one reason is it always is associated with a kind of naivete. There's always the idea that as one gets older and more mature, that one just kind of learns to accept the world as it is. And I think there's something legitimate to that. Um, but I think where that can go too far is kind of not accepting the part of you that is part of the world and does have something to say. So I think culturally we do associate those kind of that youthful energy with maybe a naivete and an idea that we don't quite understand how complex the things are that we think could be better. You know, this idea of well, who are you to criticize the world? It's so much bigger than you are. And I do I do think there's something to that, which is why I throw the caveat in there. I do also believe, though, that well, that is also part of the world, and that's working itself out. But I do like to throw that caveat in there because I know how it comes across. I've heard enough other people say it about things where I knew a little bit more than them to to try and do it a bit more tongue in cheek than maybe I otherwise would.
Yeah, yeah, I got you. I can see the point where there would be arrogance, but then I can also see the point where that could become a limiting belief. So I think it's
Mm.
there's a line to balance there. Just curious, do you think naivete is beneficial when approaching such large problems?
I'm sure it can be. Um, I think there's a naivete that clings to the simplicity that it saw originally, and there's a naivete that's just ready to learn whatever lesson comes out. Um, I think those can look pretty similar at first. I think the naivete of real beginner's mind, like a Socratic, I know I don't know anything. I think that can be tremendously valuable.
Hmm.
A naivete that's sort of self-aware about how much it doesn't know.
Yeah,
Um, it's not always easy to distinguish, even in oneself, what kind of naivete one is dealing with.
yeah, yeah. I feel like a lot of that has to do with kind of killing off the selfishness in yourself. Because I feel like when you're naive and you want to cling to simplicity, at least for me, when I'm battling this in
Mhm.
my own head, it's more out of a I want to be right, that it was this simple from the
Mm.
get-go, versus like it's possible, but I need to learn and I need to grow
Hmm.
and I need to humble myself, include other people, all that good stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think there's maybe naivete and innocence, which are adjacent in
Yeah.
that kind of a conversation. There's a real there's a real curiosity that comes from not knowing everything, and a real kind of freshness, bringing a fresh perspective to things, which I think doing that from a place of maybe self-aware naivete, we could call it, is really beneficial, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Well, tell us more about your dreams and goals. What's your vision for your life?
Oh boy. It's an interesting question. There are some really, big, hairy, audacious goals that I've developed. Like, for example, one of these really audacious goals that I have is make um, to make a recycling program that makes modular buoyant bricks. The idea being that recycling is it's cool. It's definitely directionally good, but making anything that's recycled is generally a pretty expensive proposition. Um, I was inspired to do this in part by how Elon Musk got people to buy batteries by selling them as, packaging them with motors and wheels and selling batteries as a luxury good. When I was in university, I studied renewable energy, and we could tell that energy storage was going to be kind of the keystone. That if you have these diffuse sources of energy like wind and solar, those can compete in the short term with fossil fuels, but you need some way of storing energy. And no one could quite figure that out. Um, Elon Musk figured it out by selling them as luxury goods. So I had a similar idea about recycling, particularly recycling ocean pollution. My thinking is, and this is one of those, audacious goals that I might just die without ever seeing this realized, which would be, unfortunate. But I think if you don't know that, maybe it's not audacious enough, right?
Yeah.
But this is one of those goals that I've been thinking about. How do I approach this? Where if you can recycle ocean plastic to make like a buoyant brick, just like stamp it out in some kind of a machine. There's a couple like those. If you could then make floating structures, you could market those as kind of, luxury floating homes, floating islands, even that very rich people could pay for. And, it wouldn't really make sense to spend this kind of money for a floating home or a floating island, but because you'd have this also dual purpose of cleaning up ocean pollution, you could market it as a luxury good. And I really believe there's something there. It just hits a lot of notes that I've always been interested in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of audacious goals, that's probably the most audacious goal. I have some smaller ones around, just doing some novel research in like some of the weirder aspects of the world. I don't know if you want to get into that.
I want to get into it.
Awesome. So one of the other, I guess, dreams that I would say I have is there's there's an interesting thing that I thought of when I was studying biology, which is that and I come at things a lot with this programmer coder sort of mindset. Um, and I think we come at biology and DNA with that kind of a mindset also. But looking at how DNA actually works, the way it has these palindromic repeats. It's kind of self-referential. I had the idea that maybe the logic of DNA isn't so much like a Turing machine, and it's more like the logic of a musical composition, and that it has this very self-referential and makes sense forwards and backwards, and has a lot of varied repetition. I was never all that musically intelligent, but it seems maybe because of that, like it's just a fascinating area of research. So one dream I have also is to look at DNA and try to associate it with some kind of a musical logic. There's various things you could do, you know. There's not, for example, DNA generally has uh, four base pairs. So there's not a lot of four-toned musical systems. There's four-chord songs, but not a lot of four-tone musical systems. But there's also like 20 amino acids that sets of three base pairs can produce. So there you're maybe getting into something a little more, like I remember just playing on, not like playing proper music, just playing on a zither, which is like a 17 note instrument, and thinking like, wow, this has a really nice sound. I like the variety I have here. So I do believe, and it might be nothing like that, but I do believe that there is a possibility of taking a musical approach to DNA design. And I think that would be really cool because right now in DNA design, we're at sort of a stage where it's like we have a synthesizer that can make any note, like we can synthesize DNA any way we want, but we really aren't able to predict what it will do. And unless quantum computing gets a lot better, we won't be able to predict it in any normal way. But if there is a musical logic to it, maybe that's something that we could, even without the ability to really predict what would happen, we'd be able to tell a good code from bad code, the way we tell a good musical composition from a bad musical composition. So that's something that I think is a rich ground for research, and it's the kind of research that any hobbyist who has a computer and can synthesize sounds could do.
I got you.
So in that sense, that's yeah, I mean the audacious goal would be actually coming up with something good, but I also I believe in the scientific method, because even if what you're doing doesn't work, at least you found one way not to do it. You know, Edison had this. Was it Edison? This saying about I didn't fail to discover the light bulb. I found 99 ways not to do it.
Yeah. Was that Ben Franklin or Edison?
It was Ben. I'm pretty sure it was Ben Franklin. Yeah,
I gotcha. So create a recycling program
maybe
that
Edison.
creates modular buoyant bricks. That's BHAG
Yeah.
number one. And then look at DNA and associate it with a musical logic. That's BHAG number
Hmm.
two.
Yeah,
I have a
yeah.
couple questions about these before we talk about for other dreams and goals.
Go
Can,
on.
can you already create a modular buoyant brick out of ocean plastic? Like, is it already
Sort
possible
of.
to do?
So there's someone actually who did this on a one-off, and what he did was he basically collected a lot of plastic bottles, um, put the caps on, put them in a fishing net, and then put sand on it and grew mangroves through it. So the mangroves hold everything together with their roots. Um, and that works. He lives, I think, in the Gulf of Mexico, and he lives on this island that he built from really just floating pop bottles and sand. The modular, like making something modular, I'm sure it can be done. there's plastic stamps and the like. They're kind of expensive, but it's the sort of thing one could do. The design of the actual modular brick of the floating brick, that would be like I'm sure there's an optimal design. Um, I'm just not sure what it would be. There's a lot of things to consider. You'd want it to stick to other bricks fairly well. You'd want to be able to build different things. You'd probably also want it to make a good wildlife habitat when it's exposed to the ocean. You wouldn't want this thing to be just more pollution. You'd want it to have some positive function in that sense. So I think the design considerations of a modular brick, of a buoyant brick, are a little there's a lot of approaches to that, really. And I'm not sure I have a great way of figuring out the best one, but I'm sure that more than one of those would work.
I
Like I
got you.
said, someone's done it already with pop bottles and a fishing net.
Yeah. And can you define modular for us? I think I'm a little confused on how you're using that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when I think of it, I think of it a modular buoyant building unit
I got
is the term that I think of, but it would just be something that like a Lego that you
It's like
can
systematic.
make one thing. Yeah, yeah, it's a small unit that can be built into many different larger units.
I got you. I got you. Okay. So definitely.
Actually.
Oh, hit me with it.
Oh, I was just thinking now, like the most modular atoms are carbon and silicon. So now I'm thinking if you modeled the shape of it on maybe like a carbon atom, um, that'd be kind of cool.
There you go.
It has this kind of tetrahedral structure, I think. So yeah, that might be a decent way to go about it.
Hey, awesome. little breakthroughs on the podcast here. Um, all right.
Sometimes all it takes is another mind.
There we go. Well, Chris, gun to your head. You have to create this product of luxury buildings from modular buoyant bricks in the next year. How do you spend your time for the next year? If you don't do it,
Mm.
bullet to the head. It's life or death situation. How do you spend your time?
Hmm. So there's a place called Precious Plastics, which does essentially designs for plastic presses.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would likely do is I'd get the cheapest plastic press and probably melt stuff just over boiling water in my backyard. I'd go to some local recycling plants and get them to sell me a decent amount of whatever they would recommend as a semi-buoyant material. Now, I guess there'd also be a challenge of stamping things in a way that they are naturally buoyant, but I think that would be doable. I'd have to spend kind of the first week or so, maybe the first 2 weeks, just thinking really intensely about what sort of a shape I want to go with, and I might end up just copying the basic Lego shape with an air bubble in the middle.
Yeah.
That might be the best I can do, gun to my head. Um, really, I mean, nothing wrong with Legos. They work pretty well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what I would do, I would start with that. Get a custom press made. Probably melt the plastic pretty low tech myself. My neighbors would hate me,
Yeah.
but I'm sure they'd understand if there was a gun to my head. And then probably make a raft, invite some local press as a
Marketing.
Just getting the idea out there,
Hmm.
and talk about the benefits that one could have as someone who wanted to purchase like a platform out in the harbor. I'd be lucky if I had to do it in a year because I live in a port city. So I would have access to some kind of a launch platform, and particularly where I'm thinking of making this as in a modular fashion. Um, it would be possible to transport these bricks and assemble them. Maybe get some uh, get some people to show up just as out of personal interest to help with the assembly, and then yeah, float a platform out. I try to do that maybe around the 8 month mark because things always go wrong.
Yeah.
But at that point, once there's a prototype in the water that people can look at, then I'd probably just try to get as many eyeballs on the thing as possible. See who wants the next kind of floating platform. See how it can be made to be aesthetic. If you could rent this thing out as a wedding venue, for example, I think that would already be. I don't know what exactly leads to me being executed or not at the end of the year, but I would think if you're renting one place out as just a neat venue that people are actually interested in, there's word of mouth. I think that would count. So that would be my first. That would be my first attempt at making the first iteration, and then beyond that, it would kind of depend where the interest is, who wants to make a large order for these things. If someone does, then obviously you fill that order, maybe scale up to 2 brick presses.
I got you.
And yeah, at that point you might be good to go.
Awesome. And is Dubai at all an inspiration? Like, can you take anything from the construction of Dubai and will it assist you in your efforts, or is it completely irrelevant?
Like you mean the artificial islands that Dubai is doing?
Hmm.
It's I saw actually a TV program on the construction of the Palm Island. I forget the name of it right now. Um, I think it definitely could. The interesting thing about this approach is also there's I think conventions around artificial islands that nation states kind of try to adhere to. But if you did have some environmentally interested people from Dubai who have this idea of, oh, well, there's a good way to get some oceanfront real estate. Um, Unfortunately, you can do this pretty close off the coast. The guy I talked about earlier in the podcast, he does this, um, you know, uh, a canoe ride away from shore. Um, I think the I think the construction methods used in Dubai wouldn't really translate,
Hmm.
but I think the way that interest was generated and the way that it became this really desirable location, that is definitely very much something I would try to uh, you know um, tread in the footsteps of.
I got you. And now on to the second BHAG, looking at DNA and associating it with a musical logic. How would you know
Mhm.
when you were right?
Hmm. It's a good question. I mean, I would think you'd have to. I mean, any musical analog of DNA could work. It's you know what the codes are for DNA. So I would think if people like listening to the music that this program spits out, that's I would say it's a clear sign that I'm on the right track. what I think would really make it obviously valuable would be if you can get an intuitive understanding. So like if a biohacker generating his own DNA code in a lab somewhere can listen to versions of two alternatives and get an understanding of the difference. It wouldn't necessarily be a difference they can put into words, but if they can tell which one is actually the better design by which song they like better, that I think would be an incredible success. And you could just iterate from there. I think sky would be the limit at that point. But I think the very first goal would be to just make an aesthetically pleasing song from, say, a gene sequence.
I see. I see. And the logic being correct, is it contingent on just people liking it, or is it contingent on more than that?
I think people liking it is a sign that there's probably something there. But if it can make something that feels very complex to us, because a DNA chain, it's just so big. There's so much information. It would take so bloody long if you had to read it. Like if you translated it into letters and read it like a book, there'd just be so much of it. Um, I think if there's a way to almost like compress that, the way you compress a file, like if there's a way that you can if you can bring a lot of that information into a more easily understandable format, if it can make it feel simpler, if it can make it sound beautiful, I think that's already a good sign that you're on the right track. But it's also if it can make this very complex thing feel simpler than it does when you're looking at uh, an ACTG sequence. That I think is what is necessary for there to be real value there. Otherwise, it's a neat idea and a neat toy. But if it can actually make the code itself feel simpler to the person listening to it, um, that would, I think, make a huge difference in how this kind of research is conducted.
I feel that. Would there be a way to group the DNA and like translate it to an emotion and then to a music?
Some DNA. So certain proteins are associated with certain emotions. So like serotonin, for example, antidepressants work on other animals that have serotonin because it kind of performs the same function. It performs the same feeling. So I wouldn't say all DNA. I mean, you obviously could associate it to an emotion, but not all DNA would have an obvious emotion associated. You know, the DNA that codes for the production of serotonin, that would be actually a very obvious it would be a very obvious emotion associated there. Like everyone knows the sense of being relaxed and in the flow and joyful and happy. Or like dopamine. That's actually um, that's actually a very interesting approach because you can tell whether you've hit that emotion from a musical composition. Um, I really like that because it has almost this primal four elements kind of approach, which I really like. Actually, there was another book I wrote about four elements health, and one of the things in four elements health is that it has analogs in neurotransmitters. So earth, water, fire, and air have these analogs of GABA, serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine. In a traditional five elements medicine system, a deficiency in one of the five elements shows up the exact same way that a deficiency in one of these neurotransmitters shows up in modern medicine.
Oh wow.
So so the the idea of starting with, the genes that code for these four neurotransmitters and then saying, okay, well, this is how acetylcholine feels. This is how dopamine feels. Let's find a musical schema, a musical code that reliably translate, the same cipher, so to speak, creates an acetylcholine feel for the acetylcholine DNA and a dopamine feel for the dopamine DNA. If you had that, then you'd know you have it. Yeah, that's really good. You'd still have to make sure, a dopamine feeling music to me might be stressful or put you to sleep to you.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the same for everyone, but I think you could definitely see if there's a generally the same response. It never occurred to me to look at the emotions of music and the emotions of the DNA, but you totally that could be the corner to focus in on. It's a really good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, no, of course, happy to help. Just curious when thinking about DNA sequence. So how is it specifically? We talked about those specific proteins. Is it like there's stuff
Mhm.
between those specific proteins, or is it like some DNA is completely isolated from those specific proteins? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Like it's
Uh,
protein, or is it more like protein and then like something completely different over here that doesn't code for anything?
yeah, yeah. Well, it doesn't code for anything we know. I think something like it's been a while since I've taken this class, but between like 5 and 12% of the DNA chain actually codes for protein. And then another significant chunk was just left there by viruses transcribing in our ancient history. But then there's also a part that definitely like it seems important, but we just don't really know what it does. There's and this is where, to my thinking, the um the musical analogy or the program analogy for that matter might come in. You've got a set of instructions. That's the coding part, the part that actually makes proteins. um and then there seems to be a lot that's just involved in determining what subsection of that 5% is active at any given time. And that, of course, it depends a lot on the type of cell it's in, the type of cells that are near it. Uh, there's a lot that happens there. And I, unless there's been some breakthroughs that I don't know about, there's a lot that we just don't know about that. And it's the biggest part. It's like 40 to 50%, I think. Uh, I imagine if there's some actual biologists listening to this podcast, they're tearing their hair out now because this is all like an undergraduate class and some biohacking courses a number of years ago now. But then the non-coding part, and when they say DNA is coding or non-coding, it's just like, does it get transcribed into RNA that makes proteins, or is it kind of hanging out? And it might affect which of those, which RNA gets made, but we're not really sure how. Um, the non-coding part is definitely the biggest part. Um, and it's pretty interesting that we're at a point now where, in theory, we can make a cell and a DNA chain entirely from scratch. We can put all the code that we want into it, but when they do this, the cells don't really do anything. We're still missing something about what gets a cell, like what gets the DNA doing its thing. There's definitely something unknown there. I'm actually, I'm not so sure if we do make like a music analog of DNA. We'd probably start, or I would start, because I'm an amateur and I try the easiest thing first. I would start with just the gene that codes for dopamine, for example. If you know what the protein, the dopamine protein is, made of. If you know the amino acid sequence, you can reverse engineer the DNA sequence from there, and then try to associate that with a musical schema. So if we do manage to do that, I think there's still a huge mystery in the non-coding portions of DNA, how they do what they do, and what it is exactly that they do, because we kind of we know we don't really know how to kickstart a cell with just a logical DNA sequence. There's something else that's necessary, but we don't really know what that is or why it's necessary. It's a pretty mysterious field.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that. Hmm. Well, maybe you start lining it up with musical logic and you find some breakthrough that takes us further in our DNA studies. Wouldn't that be
Well,
amazing?
that's the BHAG, yes.
Yeah,
I do think that we're looking at DNA a little too logically. I think the kind of meaning that one finds in music is maybe a little closer to how that works, and I think that's why I think it's yeah, worth investigating.
yeah. And I like that you say we're looking at it too logically because the reason I asked about mapping DNA to emotion then to music was because the things that are similar in my head between the two is our experience. Like we experience
Mm.
music and DNA kind of makes up our experience. And so if you can
Hmm.
map the thing that links those two experiences, which in my head was emotion, which is why I asked about it.
Hmm.
You might get somewhere. And so that non-coding part, if it does make up part of our experience, maybe it's worthless, but I don't know.
Hmm. What would be interesting is if you could get if you could get a musical cipher that does reliably, give a dopamine feel for the music for a dopamine coding
Yeah.
stretch of DNA. If you did that, and then you played like you used that same cipher on the known coding part, and it was like just that sounds awful.
Yeah.
I feel like that's maybe the fear, like, oh, we don't actually like
Yeah.
there's certain things we just can't comprehend or something like
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's funny. Man, that'd be cool. I'll look forward to when it comes out.
Mm. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, any other dreams or goals that you want to chat about before we move on?
Oh goodness. Those are enough to keep me busy for a while now.
I feel you.
I really appreciate the lead actually on the on focusing on emotions, because yeah, I do believe you can associate specific feelings with specific stretches of DNA, and yeah, if you can transcribe those into like if you can find one way of translating that gets all of those that hits all of those, then I think you've got something.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, shout me out when you get all famous.
Oh.
No, that's gonna be cool.
Oh.
I I look forward to our grandkids reading the history book on DNA and it references this conversation.
I feel like our grandkids would probably have like archives of podcasts
Yeah.
from the early 21st century.
Yeah,
And this was
absolutely.
where. Yeah. I mean, that's a big reason why I go on podcasts, because I think you never know where those 2 minutes of riffing are gonna really inspire someone to do what they're there to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And it'll be the smallest thing too. Like some offhand thing you
Mm.
said that just does it for somebody, you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
Hey,
Yeah,
beats around.
absolutely.
Well, cool, man. We have a couple more questions for you, so we're gonna run through them kind of quick. What are the top
Sure.
1 to 2 skills that you need to develop right now to make these two BHAGs come true?
Hmm. I would say marketing. Um, Marketing, particularly for the buoyant brick. If I can if I can press a cool brick in my backyard, that's neat, but probably not a lot of people are going to care unless I can get it in front of people who are looking for that kind of thing. So that would be one thing. Um, the other is probably just a deeper understanding of electronic music and how to produce, how to mix and produce electronic music. Probably I would probably just start with like a synthesizer of some kind. Um, and I imagine that there are probably libraries. I'd of course be, telling a computer to play it for me, so I wouldn't have to learn the motor skills, but just more understanding of how to work with tones in that way would be necessary to really, I think, get a good breakthrough
Yeah,
uh, in that kind of cipher.
I got you. I got you. Do you think you'll beat Chat GPT to the answer?
I asked ChatGPT about this, and it said I'm not connected to the internet and can't look up the DNA code for this.
I got you. I got you.
If ChatGPT can help me, I am definitely happy to give it credit.
Yeah.
I'd I'd love to see anyone come up with an innovation in either of these areas. If that's ChatGPT, then I welcome our chatbot overlords.
There we go. There we go. Well, what are the highest impact daily actions that are going to tick the needle forward towards your dreams and goals?
I think sitting down, more and more as I work on challenging projects, I think just sitting down and setting I use the Pomodoro tactic, so I'll actually set a timer and just doing that consistently. Even just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just sitting down and not thinking about anything except the problem and what I'm going to do next.
Yep.
Consistency with that, I really find that in any difficult creative endeavor, that's been key for me whenever I've succeeded, is just having the discipline and the willingness to face the blank page.
There we go. Well, this question might be a little bit redundant, but I'm asking anyway. What character trait do you most need to develop right now to make your dream life come true?
I think bravery, particularly the DNA coding thing, doesn't require much bravery. It just requires curiosity and the willingness to learn about musical theory, which I think I have both of those. But the modular buoyant brick, that is, it feels like a bit more of a challenge, and I think it feels that way because there's kind of a significant financial investment that would be necessary,
Hmm.
which would be, of course, scary to not recoup. But there's also a lot of just um, being out in front of people. Like even with the investment to make a prototype, what I would really need is someone willing to place a large order or make a large investment. I would need someone outside of me to take a bet on me, and even just asking is pretty scary. So I think more bravery around that kind of thing is the character trait that I would most need.
I got you. I got you. Well, awesome. If there were one or two people that you could meet right now, and it could be a specific person or a type of person, and they'd really help you take that next step towards these two dreams and goals, who would that person be and how would they help you?
Hmm. I'd say for the floating brick idea, it would have to be someone who is quite into seasteading, which is there are seasteading communities, but it tends to be the kind of people who aren't all that social to begin with. So maybe like sociable seasteaders that are looking to try and make a prototype happen. Um, that would be the type of person for that. For for the DNA to music thing, what I would probably need most is, you know, someone who's got a better understanding of musical theory than myself and is willing to, you know, take that deep dive, make some Pink Floyd sounding tunes, and really like show me why this kind of sequence feels this way, that kind of sequence feels that way, and maybe have the kind of jam session that leads to something kind of good. Uh, someone with a musical background to work with the technical and the programming background that I have. So what I imagine would be kind of I'd implement a cipher. We'd listen to it. They'd say, you know, probably want to tweak it this way. What can we do there? And collaborate in that way. That would be the biggest help, I think, with that.
Mm, I got you. I got you. There we go. I feel like those two people, specifically the music theory person, might be like
Mhm.
a LinkedIn connection away.
Could well be, yeah. That's true. Musical theory is it's got a lot of people that play with it. It's a good point.
Do you think there's a professor
Um,
out there that loves musical theory and also has a hobby around kind of science DNA?
hmm. Um, there's probably a couple. Do you have someone particular in mind?
No, I have no idea.
Uh,
I just figured there would be
oh,
one.
okay, yeah. I actually I have a professor friend who was very interested in getting me to teach him about the mathematics of quantum mechanics, and I was getting him to teach me about musical theory. We've not been in touch lately, but would be yeah, it would be someone, maybe even a music teacher, like someone that I can start out by just hiring and saying, "Hey, this is the kind of music that I want to create. Can you work with me on this?"
Yeah, there we go.
And yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, you kind of already answered this question, but maybe you want to add to it. What is an action step you could take right now to either meet that sociable seasteader or that person who understands music theory and can take that deep dive into how DNA would sound as music with you?
Hmm.
I'm talking we get off the
Yeah,
call and you
there's
can take it right now.
I think the next step I could do is definitely is just search for musical tutors. Probably Upwork. I've met some good contractors on Upwork. Find some people who do tutoring who are into digital music, because I think we would start out by, you know, coding tones and notes, uh, and yeah, put out a contract for maybe a certain number of hours, tutoring me, working with me on this composition or these four compositions. Um, yeah, I think Upwork would be definitely the place for the musical expert. The sociable seasteaders, I don't know. I am a member of some seasteading communities, but they don't tend to like advertising. It attracts a particular type, you know.
Yeah. I was about to say maybe there's a Facebook group or something, but I'm sure you would know about it if there was.
Yeah, there is a Facebook group. It's not that active, but
Yeah. I got you. I got you. You just got to get on
probably a
TikTok.
subreddit also. Yeah.
Oh, there's definitely a subreddit. 100%. Yeah.
hmm
What you got to do, you got to build that first brick, get it on TikTok, go viral, and then people will flock to you.
hmm Yeah, yeah. The that first brick.
Yep. There we go. All right, we got a couple more
Hmm.
questions. You
All
ready?
right. Yeah.
What is one limiting belief that continues to pop up in your life, if any?
Hmm. There, of course, it's hard to fully articulate a limiting belief. Um, I think just the idea that I need to fail a lot before succeeding.
Mm,
That's it's something that I think is true in some sense. There needs to be a willingness to fail, but I think the expectation of failing a lot also leads you to be maybe more cautious or plan for a longer journey than you actually need and therefore delay setting out. So that's probably in my case, it's been one thing that I've failed. I failed a number of times, mostly in small ways, but also in big ways. And I think there's a lot of lessons learned from that, of course, which tells you a better way to approach the same kind of thing the next time. But it also makes it a lot harder because you have some sunk costs that you can't recover. So I think the idea that uh, things probably won't work out the way I expect them to right away um, does tend to make me take a bit longer on things than I otherwise would.
I got you. I got you. Yeah, it's interesting. Do you know who Alex Hormozy is?
Doesn't the name doesn't ring a bell?
Gotcha. We're about to ask the
Alex
question
Hormozy.
with kind of his mindset behind it a little bit here in a second, but he talks about you talked about costs not being able to be recouped when you fail.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Alex Hormozy talks about the fact that we all have a very large amount of debt. And that debt is in the form of an ignorance debt. And so there are things we
Mm.
don't know that allow us to stay where we are. For example, he was like, it costs you, if you're making $50,000 a month. Yeah, he's really rich, so he talks in big numbers. If you're making $50,000 a month, um, it costs you $950,000 a month to not know how to make a million a month. And so
Mm.
every month you're losing $950,000 because you don't know how to make a million a month. And it was like if you paid
Hmm.
$100,000 to learn how to make a million a month, and in 3 years you were making a million a month, like that $100,000 investment would be worth it. And so he just talks about that ignorance debt of like we are
Hmm.
you're paying that debt that you're talking about, the cost that you're not recouping, you're paying it either way.
Hmm.
It's either with your time or with your money. So the question is,
Hmm.
which is more important? Is kind of his thought process around.
Hmm. Gotcha. That's yeah, that is an interesting take.
Yeah,
Um,
it's called me out on some stuff because I'd also procrastinate. I'd just be like, you know, it'd really suck to want these things my whole life and never get them. So it's either stop wanting
mhm.
them and completely let them go and just live in bliss, live content, or do it now.
Mhm.
It's kind of how my thought process is about it. But
Mhm.
alrighty, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, what's up?
Oh, just it reminded me of a quote I heard. If you're not content with your life, either change it or accept it, and both are hard.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Exactly. Exactly. I know we're at time. I got like two more questions for you. You got time for it?
Sure, yeah, shoot.
Awesome. So you talked about that limiting belief, the fact that you need to fail a lot before succeeding. If you were to
Mhm.
change that limiting belief into an abundant phrase that really spoke to your heart, what would that phrase be?
So not changing the belief, but couching it in terms of abundance.
Um, yeah, if you could replace that limiting belief with an abundant belief, for example,
Hmm.
or but that abundant belief needs to speak to your heart because I feel like sometimes how we vocalize our limiting beliefs doesn't always necessarily get at the pain we're feeling. So I really want this phrase that is abundant to speak to your heart. if that makes sense.
Hmm. I would say that in that case, I would say when you go after what you truly want, um, you will always have, you will always encounter the lessons you need.
Mm, there we go. I love it. We got one last question for you. You ready?
Sure.
So I'm going to frame this next question. Alex Hormozy said that the difference between manipulation and help is intent. And I think his point here is that you're influencing people in both situations, but manipulation is about getting somebody to do something you want them to do, while help
Hmm.
is about seeking to understand what somebody else wants and then helping them get there. This
Hmm.
question is going to be about help, not manipulation. Now,
Hmm.
there's a common saying that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I actually found out from Dr. Alan Leica, who was a guest on my show, that you can get a horse to drink. You just have to salt its oats. Now, I want you to think about a person with a really fixed mindset. They're not willing to accept help. They're not willing to accept change, and they hate their life. How do we,
Hmm.
you and I, create an environment not to make the choice for them, but to salt their oats and help them change their life?
Hmm. I think it depends on what is keeping the person in that static that static way of life. And I'm immediately thinking about my own. I said I need more bravery to move ahead. Um, I think it's a common virtue to need to develop, but I think it's also, I'm speaking about myself in the place of this person here. I think the first thing that one would need to do is really understand, if this person hates their life, uh, why haven't they taken that first step? What's keeping them in it? And then seeing maybe what the balancing force, the part that's there that they're not seeing is.
Hmm, there we go. Awesome. Well, Chris, that's all we got for you, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Timmy.
Is there
Great being here.
anything else that you want to chat about before we sign off?
No, that's great. I look forward to seeing the episode out. Where can I watch it?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll send you the links after with the email. We'll post it, shoot you an email. The links will be in there, all that good stuff.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, if you guys liked this and you liked what Chris had to say, make sure to check him out. All the links to do so will be down in the show notes. And make sure to grab his book, Mindful Programming. Also, if you happen to know any, what were we calling them? Sociable sea stedders. Is that correct?
Sociable seasteaders. I
There we
love
go.
alliterations.
If you happen to know any of them, connect them to Chris. If you happen to understand music theory or know somebody who does, also connect them to Chris. Thank you guys for watching. We will see you on the next one. And on that note, we're out.